was the perfect storm, a rare combination of volatile weather conditions that mixed to form an unprecedented superstorm, and it was headed straight for New York City. 1 year later, the city is healing. Homes are being rebuilt and businesses are reopening, but there is still a long road ahead.
You know, and we don't want to spend Christmas, we don't want to spend Thanksgiving, we don't want to spend New Year's in a hotel again, you know. I would like to be in my house.
We were out of the house for almost 10 months.
The reality is there's still a lot of people that need a lot of help on Staten Island.
On October 29, 2012, Hurricane Sandy raged up the East Coast and across the New York region, cutting an unimaginable path of destruction. The mammoth storm created a record 14-foot surge that put Lower Manhattan under several feet of water. Subway tunnels flooded, power failed, huge swaths of the city plunged into darkness. Dozens of people lost their lives, thousands lost their homes. As meteorologists watched Sandy's erratic movement, swelling size, and unusual mix of warm and cold air, it became clear the city faced the worst-case scenario. Mayor Michael Bloomberg announced mandatory evacuations for New York City residents in flood zones.
The most important thing I can say right now is if you live in Zone A, you must evacuate. We have a plan to keep you and New Yorkers safe. If you follow that plan, we'll get through this storm just fine.
Not everyone heeded the orders to evacuate. Some New Yorkers stayed put. They hunkered down. They'd faced hurricanes in the past and weathered those storms. But this storm was different.
Hurricane Sandy broke all the rules. Usually when you have a storm that's moving north, it gets weaker and it moves east, off to sea, over towards Europe because of the jet stream. It pushes it out. So normally storms go weaker and they go right. This storm went stronger and it went left. It ended up tracking right into Atlantic City, and Atlantic City was the spot where we made landfall, but that made it even worse for us because we were just north. So we were in the strongest part of the storm, which is just north of the eye of the storm. So it was a perfect path in terms of maximizing the destructive power of the storm.
Those who chose to stay put are now haunted by memories of the harrowing night the violent storm made landfall.
It was like a bad horror movie. My brother was at the front door and we were thinking, oh, he's gonna come over and have pizza and we're all gonna kind of batten down for the storm together. And he was like screaming, you gotta get out. The water was up to my knees. I stood in front of the house and I watched 3 waves coming down, hitting me in the knees, right in front of my house. So we were able to drive out. The water was coming over the hood of the car. And the kids were afraid. I was just like, go, because I've never seen the ocean in front of this house. And pieces of the pier across the street were thumping into the side of the car as we were driving. I mean, it was just like, oh my God. And I just kept, then I was like total mommy mode. It's like, I can't believe, you know, that I put my kids in this situation. So, and the Port Authority had closed the bridge and they had the cars there blocking it, but thankfully, I was ready to wave out my press pass or whatever, but they were just like, come on, go. And on the other side of the bridge, they couldn't believe we had gotten over the bridge.
When the water first started moving, my daughter, she came in the room and she said, Ma, the water is moving, you know. So the water was past the step and it started coming under our door. It was coming through the radiator. When I went in my room, it was coming through the box you put the ACs in. It was coming through the tub. It was coming through the toilet. Like water was coming from everywhere. It just got crazy less than an hour. It was total chaos before we knew it. And when the refrigerator fell, and you know how heavy a refrigerator is? When that fell, I said, oh my God, it's in your hands. That's all I can say.
While the floodwater poured into Sherelle Manuel's house in Far Rockaway, just a few miles away in Breezy Point, a loose electrical wire caught fire. It sparked a monstrous blaze that threatened the beachfront community's 2,800 homes. Assistant Chief Joseph Pfeiffer, a longtime resident of Breezy Point, arrived at the scene ready to fight what would become the biggest residential fire in FDNY history.
When I arrived, I saw dozens of homes on fire, and trying to make sense on the extent of the fire. We had some volunteer companies that were down here. New York City Fire Department was down, and the task was to organize an attack on the fire. As the fire took hold of the area, the radiated heat was so hot that buildings would explode on fire, that they just didn't light up and start a little. The entire building would go on fire, shooting flames 50 feet in the air. And as the fire moved, it moved from building to building and block to block. During the fire, it was difficult to find the hydrants because they were underwater. But when we found the hydrants, there wasn't a lot of pressure in it. So I went to our firefighters and I said to them, find me water. And the firefighters did. They took this storm surge. They were sitting in 2 feet of water. And they took that storm surge, threw their hoses overboard, and started to suction the water from the ocean that caused all this damage. And by figuring out how to get a good source of water made all the difference in the world. The fire raged to about 7 o'clock in the morning. At that point, the wind shifted. Instead of coming out of the southeast, it shifted to just the south. I had units already deployed, and we were able to move in quickly, and we were able to control the fire.
Sandy raged through the night, causing devastating flooding and power outages across the tri-state area. The Brooklyn Battery Tunnel flooded with an estimated 86 million gallons of water. 39th Street in Manhattan became the dividing line between dark and light. The power blinked out and didn't return for days.
I was actually out that night during the storm. I bumped into somebody, and I literally, because he couldn't see, it was so dark, I bumped into Governor Cuomo. And I remember the first thing he said to me, he was looking down at the Whitewater Rapids, and my favorite question of all time, is this normal? I said, no, this is not normal, sir.
It was by far unprecedented. I've worked my entire career. I've dealt with a number of snowstorms. I've dealt with a number of, either hurricanes or high wind events, and this was second to none. But we had probably 95% of the system back within 5 to 6 days of when the hurricane cleared, which was a remarkable accomplishment because of what the employees did, but it actually breathed life back into New York City and got the economy working again and the people working again.
New Yorkers woke the next morning to scenes of utter destruction. In Breezy Point, 126 homes were demolished. The powerful impact of Sandy's rushing waves broke the boardwalks in Coney Island and the Rockaways like matchsticks. Thousands of people were stuck inside their apartments, particularly the elderly and those living in housing projects. Sandy claimed the lives of 44 people in New York City and 10 in Long Island. Among them, young brothers Brendan and Connor Moore, aged 2 and 4, were sucked out of the arms of their mother Glenda as she struggled to escape the swirling floodwaters in Staten Island. Diane Norris recalls holding her 89-year-old mother as long as she could as the water level rose to shoulder level in their Staten Island home. After 4 hours in the freezing water, she lost her grip and watched helplessly as her elderly mother slipped under the surface. A 28-year-old police officer shuttled his family to safety in the attic of their Staten Island house. He went to check one last thing in the basement and was killed after coming into contact with water electrified by downed power lines.
That morning, following the storm, I walked from my sister's home to mine, over down wires and just being careful not to step anywhere where we would be electrocuted, and was just stunned. I don't think there's a word to describe the feeling of walking through and seeing the damage and the devastation that was happening. We had over 300 students that were directly impacted by the storm, so it was quite overwhelming. We actually became the hub for the neighborhood. I think within 3 hours we had an entire dance gym filled with clothes, supplies,
baby items. It was the most amazing thing that happened. So now the DOE says that we have to close at regular time on Friday. And I just said, we can't. We can't. There's no place for anyone to go. We need to keep this open. We need a place for people to come, even if it's just to charge their phone in hopes of getting in touch with people they need to. I think one of the most devastating moments of that first morning was a student's mother coming and finding me on the street, hysterical crying that one of our students had lost her father and brother, that they had drowned in the basement. And I'll never forget that.
As the water began to recede, homeowners and business owners returned to assess the damage.
It was just a big mess. Like everything was knocked over. So it was surreal to see, you know, your flat screen TV down in water with sand. There was sand in here. I thought we could just throw everything out, clean everything up, and get back in, like in days. So obviously, that's not the case.
I got a call from my superintendent. And he basically said, you know, are you sitting down? And I said, yes. And he said, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's bad. It's bad over here. I just turned the corner and, I mean, my entire store was just out in the street in 4 feet of water. Paintings of dogs, mannequins, cat food, cat collars, people wading through the water, taking things, looting. But as you know, I didn't even care. I mean, that stuff is contaminated with East River water. And I walk into my store, which had no doors, and the sandbags that I had piled up, you know, 6 feet high, were found in the back of my shop, all the way in the back. That's how forceful the water was. And just everything had been swept out. We found things as far as 3-4 blocks away that belonged to the store.
As always in times of crisis, resilient New Yorkers joined forces to help neighbors in need. Each neighborhood had its league of hometown heroes, and those from out of town pitched in too. Hundreds of runners in town for the canceled New York City Marathon traveled to Staten Island to help cart away debris. After initial disaster relief efforts, the harder work began. Once thriving neighborhoods had become ghost towns. It was time to rebuild.
We did completely gut the house. The house was just gutted to the rafters. So the New York press photographers, Daily News photographers, national press photographers all came down here probably a week after the storm. They were great. And that whole group of people, they came down here and completely threw out all of the appliances, cut the walls. It was amazing.
My determination from day one, and I said it, you know, 2 days after Sandy, I will get rebuilt. I will be back at whatever, you know, cost. I will be back. It was a marathon to try to get this place opened up. I had no idea. All I knew was all I wanted to do is get back into business and sell dog collars. I'm open, my doors are open. Somehow the tourists are actually coming down to this big construction site in front of me and making a turn and walking in, and it's been amazing. And it's all for, you know, that one person walking in and says, I don't even have a dog, but I just wanted to come in and say, congratulations, I've been following your story. I'm so happy that you never gave up. And it's just those words that remind you why you know, keep going and wake up every day and fight the fight.
By now, most short-term recovery programs had phased out, but 2 remain active in Staten Island. Among them are the guy and rescue workers who plan to stay for several years to help in the rebuilding effort.
It's been a year, and at the beginning, there was a lot of help, but there's still a really long recovery period on Staten Island, and we need help out here. So the supplies have dropped off, the donations have dropped off. So I just want people to remember that Staten Island still needs help. And you know, we made a commitment when we started that we were going to be here until the end. And FEMA tells us it could take 5 to 7 more years. So we're committed to staying and helping as many people as we can.
But not everyone is back home. Sherelle and her family are still displaced and have hopped from one temporary residence to another. The family is camped out in a Times Square hotel for now, and Sherelle commutes 3 hours each day, shuttling her 7-year-old daughter to school in Far Rockaway.
It affects me as a mother because I don't have a home for my kids, you know, and I can't cook here. As you can see, there's no stove. You know, we have a little refrigerator because I got to buy her cereal and milk and stuff like that. But it's just stressful because, you know, we cooped up in a little room with all this stuff. And a little window, there's no really air to breathe in here. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not like having your own where you have your privacy. So it's been total chaos, you know, through losing all my stuff, you know, everything that I own. We're human. We're people that have jobs, you know, that have lives, that had homes, you know, that wants all of that back. And we're fighting to get that. It's just that it takes time. Mentally, this have destroyed a lot of people. You know, mentally, this have really destroyed me, you know, just thinking about my kids living in a hotel. You know, I'm living in a hotel. I can't cook for my kids. We don't have no privacy. That's a lot to deal with.
New York is on the rebound, but as the more devastated areas spring to life, the city faces an inevitable question. Could there be another Sandy?
The last storm we saw like this was 1938. Didn't take this path, but it brought similar destruction. So it's been a while, but now that the climate's changing, the oceans are warmer, and the weather is more violent, this is certainly a concern.
Fear doesn't stop New York from moving forward. The city is built on transformation. Those who witnessed Sandy's worst say the sounds of reconstruction are signs of life and hope.
Watching houses being built and the noise of saws is actually a really good sound. It means that the community is rebuilding, and the community is also building to new flood levels. It's really a sign of hope. Whether it's Breezy Point or other areas of the city that was so affected, by having a community rebuild, it tells everybody we're coming back. We're going to come back stronger.